They told me my son would finally live, that a donor had been found just in time. But when I saw the name, I felt the ground vanish beneath me. Now every beat of my son's heart reminds me of a boy no one told me existed. Some nights, I dream I'm holding my son's heart in my hands. Not bleeding. Not broken. Just quiet. And I'm whispering, stay. Like it's a question. Like he has a choice. My name is Tom. I'm 36. My son Liam is 7. He was born with a heart that tried to quit on him before his 2nd birthday. He hasn't run in 4 years. The doctors call it restrictive cardiomyopathy. I call it hell with a waiting list. Every week we go to the hospital. Every week they say the same thing. Still no match. But last month, they called and said 2 words I hadn't let myself hope for anymore. We found one. I didn't even cry. I just nodded. Like hearing you've been pardoned when you've already accepted the execution. The donor was a child. Age not disclosed. Parents anonymous. The match was perfect. Liam was prepped. We signed the consent. The surgery was scheduled for Monday. 3 days away. That night, I couldn't sleep. I wandered the hallways of the hospital, pretending to get coffee. I stopped at the nurse's station, asked to confirm some paperwork. Just nerves. The woman behind the desk smiled and handed me a printout. I wasn't supposed to look. But I did. And that's when I saw it. Donor name, Cade M., male. Age 9. Emergency intake, Junction County. M. My last name is Mallon. Only 3 people in the world spell it the way we do. Me. My dad. And my brother Evan. Cade. I sat down right there on the floor. Not dramatically. Just, dropped. My brother cut contact with me 6 years ago after a fight about money. I didn't even know he had a kid. I texted him. No answer. I called. Disconnected line. I looked up obituaries in Junction County. Found one posted 2 days ago. Cade Mallon, age 9. Bright soul, lover of rockets and peanut butter. Survived by his mother, Hannah. Hannah. I remembered her. Evan's girlfriend from years ago. Quiet. Artistic. She left town when they broke up. Said it was for a fresh start. No mention of a father in the obituary. No mention of Evan. No funeral date listed. Just a single photo. It was him. Dark hair. Slouched shoulders. Evan's eyes. My son's donor was my nephew. And no one told me. Grief isn't always sharp. Sometimes it's slow. Like warm water around your ankles. You don't notice you're drowning until it's past your ribs. That's how it felt. Knowing Liam would live. And knowing Cade had to die for it. I told myself it was a coincidence. Mallon's not that rare, right? Except, it is. Not with the spelling. Not with that middle name, Cade. I looked up Evan again. No social media. No forwarding address. But Hannah, she had an Etsy account. I didn't message her. I just stared at her shop banner, watercolor portraits of kids. One of them looked like Cade. I clicked on it. The title. Stargazer. 8 by 10, sold. Not for resale. I stared at that word, sold. Like his face was something final. I didn't tell the doctors. I didn't tell my wife. Jenna was already breaking in slow motion, and I couldn't throw this on top of her. Instead, I sat in the cafeteria, day after day, staring at a juice box Cade would never drink. I Googled everything. How long donor information stays confidential? What exceptions are made? None of it made sense. Until I started reading the intake notes again. Emergency intake. Junction County. 9 years old. No known paternal guardian on record. That last line hit me harder than I expected. No known paternal guardian. They didn't list Evan. He wasn't there. But someone had to give consent for Cade to be a donor. And it wasn't Evan. It was Hannah. I went back to the obituary page. There was a "Leave a Memory" button. I clicked it. Didn't post anything. But someone else had. He had the best laugh. Always wanted to be an astronaut. I'm sorry we couldn't help in time. JH. I read it 5 times. We couldn't help in time. What did that mean? Was he sick? Was he already dying? Or had something gone wrong? That night, I walked the hospital halls again. I couldn't go home. Couldn't face Liam's smile. Not when it was bought with another child's silence. The nurse at the desk had seen me before. "You okay, Mr. Mallon?" I nodded. Lied. "Just, can't sleep." She hesitated, then said. "If it helps," the mother came in after. Didn't say much. Just signed the forms and left. "The mother?" I asked. "Cade's?" She nodded. Seemed calm. Quiet. Worn out. "What about the father?" The nurse shook her head. "Didn't see one. But there was a man outside." I froze. "What kind of man?" She thought for a second. "Leather jacket. Pale. Didn't come in. Just waited. Looked. I don't know. Angry. But tired." She looked up. "Kind of like you." I left without saying goodbye. When I got back to the waiting room, Jenna was asleep in the chair. Liam's hand was resting on her leg. So small. So weightless. I sat beside them. Watched them breathe. And then I opened my phone. Typed in an old number I hadn't used in 6 years. The one Evan had before he disappeared. It rang once. Then again. And on the third ring, it connected. No voice. Just a breath. And then one word. Tom. I hadn't heard his voice in 6 years. Now it was in my ear like it never left. It didn't come with fury. Or grief. Or even shock. Just breath. I stood in the hospital corridor, staring at the blue speckled tile that never quite shone clean. The phone felt heavier than it should have. My name was still in his mouth, soft like a question he didn't want answered. My throat stayed tight. There wasn't much to say. I asked only what I needed. Was it him? The silence said enough. I leaned against the wall. My knees didn't trust me anymore. He didn't explain. Didn't defend. Just filled the line with pieces. Fragments. A name. A year. A heart condition no one knew about. Money wired, but never his presence. A hospital he'd never entered. A window he'd parked under instead. He hadn't been there when Cade's eyes closed. He said Hannah didn't want him near. That he ruined things just by breathing. It was strange, how small he sounded. Like the version of him I remembered had rusted and caved inward. I walked past Liam's door and kept going. The vending machine light buzzed overhead, static and low. I stared at the rows of chips, each packet lined up like quiet soldiers. Everything in order. Nothing moving. It felt like a mockery. He said he didn't know Cade was a donor until it was too late. Until someone online posted about the boy whose heart saved another. And when he looked closer, the names matched. I didn't answer. I wasn't sure how. My mind kept catching on one phrase. The one I hadn't said out loud. His son saved mine. Not by choice. Not with glory. Not even knowing. I imagined Cade in a hospital bed. Alone. No father by the window. No hand to hold. Just forms, machines, and fluorescent light. And Hannah, somewhere in the shadows, signing his life into someone else's chest. Maybe shaking. Maybe not. The weight of it pressed in behind my ribs. I didn't remember hanging up. I just knew the line went quiet, and I was still standing there, hands shaking, staring at a sticker peeling off the vending machine glass. I wandered outside for air. Cold wind slapped my face. I let it. The parking lot looked different now. Somewhere out here, Evan had watched it all happen. Too late. Too far. Too silent. A family broken by choices. And one child pulled into the wreckage, twice. I didn't cry. I sat on a bench outside the ER doors and watched the sky bleed into morning. Hospital lights flickered behind me. Inside, my son was alive. His heart was strong. But it wasn't his. Not entirely. It beat with another boy's rhythm. And I couldn't stop hearing it. Not the sound. But the question it whispered. Why him? They called it a miracle. Doctors smiled wider. Nurses used softer voices. People brought cards, cupcakes, bright balloons with words like strong and blessed printed in Comic Sans. Liam blinked at them like they were speaking a language he didn't recognize. I did too. He came home 3 days earlier than expected. Sat in his bed like he didn't trust the space around him. He touched his chest often. Not in pain. Just, checking. Listening. At night, I watched him sleep. Not because I was afraid he'd stop breathing. Because I couldn't shake the feeling that someone else was breathing through him. I tried to keep the rhythm of the house. Waffles on Sundays. Cartoons humming in the background. Laundry folded but never put away. But the silence changed shape. It wasn't fear anymore. It was weight. Jenna cried once, in the garage, alone. She thought I didn't hear. But I stood by the door, hands full of groceries I didn't remember buying, and listened to her sob through her sleeve. The kind of crying you do when you're ashamed of needing it. I never brought it up. She started reading again. Mostly books about grief masked as healing. Chapters with titles like Letting Go of Guilt or When Joy Feels Wrong. She read them with a highlighter but never made a single mark. The world moved on. Everyone moved on. I didn't. Cade's name sat in my chest like a breath I couldn't let out. The notebook still lived in my drawer. The folder of screenshots. The Reddit post. The grainy photo. The caption, Family Secrets Run in Blood. People speculated. No one knew it was us. The anonymity held. But I did start noticing the way strangers stared at Liam in the park. He ran now. That was new. His knees scuffed like they used to. His cheeks flushed. He smiled more. But there was a moment, just once, when he fell hard on the sidewalk. Not serious. No blood. But he froze. Not from pain. From something else. He pressed his hand to his chest and whispered something I couldn't hear. When I asked what it was, he shrugged. Felt like someone else was scared. I didn't ask again. That night I dug out the obituary again. Reread every word. I found Hannah's name listed on a local art website. She had a new collection going up next month. The title, What Was Left Behind. I stared at the screen for an hour. Didn't click. Didn't write. Didn't call. Just sat there, surrounded by the hum of a refrigerator and a child sleeping down the hall, with a heart I had no right to accept. Some days, people say things like, "You must be so relieved." I can't imagine how grateful you feel. What a gift. And I nod. I say yes. But it's not gratitude I feel. It's debt. Layered, permanent, unpaid. And I don't know who to repay anymore. There's a drawing taped to Liam's wall now. A rocket ship. Crayons, messy lines, uneven stars. He said it came to him in a dream. He said the boy in the rocket was going home. And he looked at me, quiet, serious. He's not gone. Just, somewhere else. I smiled. Said nothing. And that night, after everyone slept, I stared at that drawing until the stars blurred. And I whispered into the dark. I know. I see him too. I didn't tell Jenna I was going. I just said I needed air, and she didn't ask what kind. We were getting good at that, giving each other space wide enough to bury things in. The gallery wasn't far. An old bank-turned-art center downtown. One of those buildings where the air still smells faintly of paperwork and wet paint. The floor creaked. The silence held its breath. The show was small. No fanfare. Just a sign taped to the wall. What was left behind, works by H.M. There were 12 pieces. I recognized him in every one. Not directly. Not portrait style. But in fragments, shoes under a chair, a stuffed bear dropped in a puddle, a drawing half erased with a thumbprint over the sun. One canvas was blank except for a single corner where a heart was outlined in pencil, unfinished. You could still see the smudges where her hand had hovered. I stood in front of it longer than I should have. That's when she walked in. I didn't notice at first. I felt her before I saw her. The weight of someone who'd carried too much for too long. She stopped 3 steps behind me. No greeting. No gasp. Just stillness. When I turned, she didn't look surprised. She looked older. Not aged. Just, burned through. Eyes like ash, something had lived there once. She waited for me to speak. I didn't. We stood in silence like people at a gravesite who'd both forgotten the right prayer. She nodded once, a motion that said, I know. Then walked past me. Stopped at a painting with a red streak through the center. Like someone had tried to cut it and then changed their mind. She stood there a while. Then she said one thing. Barely above a whisper. I didn't tell you because you would have tried to save him. My chest tightened. She kept facing the canvas. And I needed to let him go without having to justify it to anyone. I didn't argue. I couldn't. Because she was right. If I had known, I would have begged. Offered money. Pleaded with doctors. Pulled strings. Made her feel small. And Cade would have died anyway. Only more confused. I looked at the painting again. The red wasn't violent. It was soft. Like ribbon. There was a chair in the corner of the gallery. She sat. I sat across from her. We didn't talk. She held her wrist like it hurt. I folded my hands. We shared a silence too big for words. Eventually, she handed me something from her bag. A photo. Cade. Age 6. Holding a science fair trophy too big for his hands. His shirt was inside out. His shoelaces untied. His smile, the kind that only exists before the world teaches you to fake it. I stared at it for a long time. Then she said. That was the day he told me he wanted to fly. My throat burned. She put the photo back. Before she left, she paused at the door. You're not him, Tom. I didn't understand at first. But later, when I replayed it, I realized what she meant. You're not your brother. She walked away. And I sat there long after the lights dimmed, staring at the unfinished heart in the corner of the wall. People think when a child survives, you throw a party. What they don't tell you is that survival comes with side effects. Guilt. Disbelief. And noise you can't shut out. At first, it was just whispers. A neighbor asking if we knew the donor personally. A woman at the grocery store who stopped me, stared too long at Liam's scar, then smiled like she was entitled to it. I started avoiding places. We bought groceries late. Ate at home. Skipped school events. Jenna said it was transition time, but we both knew the truth. It was easier to hide than to answer the questions that hadn't even been asked yet. Online, the story resurfaced. Someone reposted the photo of Liam. Called him, the boy who got a second chance. No mention of Cade. No mention of us. But in the comments, one user wrote. Sometimes, a miracle is built on someone else's bones. I couldn't breathe for hours after reading it. At dinner, Liam asked if he'd always have the heart. I nodded. He said nothing, just kept eating. Macaroni and peas. Then quietly. I think it dreams. I looked at him. He didn't elaborate. Just finished chewing and asked if he could go draw. Later I found a picture he'd taped to his wall. 2 boys. One in a bed. One floating above it. Both with the same face. No mouths. Just eyes that looked like mine. Jenna didn't ask. She just stared at the picture and went back to folding laundry. We were learning how to live without explanations. Julia wrote me a letter. No return address. Just one sentence inside. You did what he couldn't. I didn't know if she meant Evan or Cade. Maybe both. I burned the letter in the sink and didn't tell anyone. The next day, the school sent home a newsletter. It included a feature about miracle kids. Liam's name was listed. There was a photo. They'd taken it without asking. He was smiling. Bright. Alive. I stared at it for an hour. Then deleted the email. I took Cade's photo from the drawer. Sat with it. I lit a candle, not for ritual, just light. And I whispered his name. Once. It didn't echo. It didn't change the room. But it stayed in the air, like a truth finally spoken. The first snowfall came early that year. Liam pressed his palm to the window and counted flakes out loud, like they were stars, not ice. He asked if Cade ever saw snow. I said yes. That was a lie. But it felt like the right shape of one. We don't talk about Cade often. Not because it's forbidden. Because some names live louder in silence. Liam never asked who he was. But once, when we passed a boy with the same haircut, he whispered. He feels close. Then kept walking. I didn't follow up. Some moments don't want explanation. Jenna planted a tree in the backyard. No plaque. No speech. Just her and a shovel and the quiet space that grief clears when it gets tired of screaming. It was a dogwood. The same kind we passed on the way to the hospital that morning in spring. I asked her why. She just said. It blooms early. Evan didn't show up again. No call. No letter. But I started seeing him in places that made no sense. A man in a bookstore with his same gait. A voice on a podcast that cracked in the same spot. I didn't chase it. Didn't pull the thread. Sometimes ghosts need distance. Sometimes you do, too. Liam's drawing stayed up. The 2 boys. Over time, he added stars. Then planets. He gave them names. One was called Before. The other, Still. The night of Cade's birthday, I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark and imagined him at 10. Did he still love rockets? Would he have hated broccoli? I made tea I didn't drink. I wrote a letter I didn't send. It ended with, "I carry you in every beat." Then I folded it and buried it beneath the dogwood tree. A few weeks later, Liam ran across the yard for the first time without stopping. His arms flailed. His face split into something so joyful it almost hurt to watch. At the edge of the yard, he stopped, turned, and yelled. "It doesn't even hurt anymore." And just like that, I broke. Not from sadness. From relief. From grace I didn't earn but accepted anyway. There's a photo on our fridge now. A new one. Liam, holding a paper heart he made at school. Inside, he wrote, "Thank you for sharing your sky." He doesn't know how perfect that is. I didn't tell him. I just smiled. And whispered Cade's name, one last time, into the winter light.